Hey everyone, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where we are on a mission to build an army of Catholic entrepreneurs who will use their influence to reinsert God into the culture. I'm your host, Silas Maynor. As you guys probably know, I recently attended the Sent Summit at Notre Dame campus. This took place September 8th through the 11th. If you're listening to this right when it comes out, I am about 4 weeks after the fact. I was traveling for a little bit, so it took me a while for me to get this out. But for those of you unfamiliar with the Ascent Summit, the way I would quickly describe it is it's the largest, at least to my knowledge, gathering of Catholic business owners and investors in the US on an annual basis. There might be some other things that I'm not familiar with. I know the Gottis Institute has a really big gathering as well, so that could be bigger, but this is one of the largest, if not the largest. And if you are already familiar with what Cent is and what the Cent Summit is, feel free to skip forward because I'm about to explain it. The Cent Summit is hosted by Cent Ventures, an executive peer group for Catholic entrepreneurs and senior executives. Their kind of core product is the fellowship, where you can join a group of, I think it's 7 to 8 altogether, other executives in a similar field, and then you meet with them each month to learn from each other and just kind of talk about the challenges in your business. Very much a peer group, right? There's usually a facilitator that's involved. You can think of it like Hampton, but for Catholics. There's other groups kind of similar, like Chief, and I think there's another one for marketers. But you get the idea. 8 people, similar kind of like struggles that they're going with, that they can't necessarily find those people in their local neighborhoods or local cities. So they get together and they have these discussions. So it's really important because as your business grows, the problems that you face make it harder to relate with other Catholic friends as a business owner, and especially if they're not running a business. And because you're Catholic, it's very hard to relate to other secular business owner friends because you're doing something very different and you have a different ethos. Hence, what Cent Ventures is building. So if you are doing north of 500K in revenue and or have raised more than 500K, I'd recommend checking it out just if you're not familiar. I'll put it in the link that you can check out Cent, but what they're doing is really, really incredible, and I'm a big fan of what John has built and what Nick is now taking over. Back to the summit. They host a summit each year to bring together a lot of these different incredible people, and we get to hear from some really amazing speakers and have small group sessions. There's also various panel discussions that happen throughout, and all of this, of course, accompanied with daily mass, prayer, the opportunity for confession, and then, of course, endless opportunities for networking and just having camaraderie with other similar people in a similar state of life with a shared mission. They also do have this really kind of big item that's part of it is the pitch competition, where I believe it's a 10K check gets written to one of the winners of this pitch competition, and there's also a mission showcase for people who are more in the nonprofit side of things. So now that you know what the Cent Summit is all about, here are some of my biggest takeaways from it. And I'm going to keep these relatively brief in terms of how deep I go into each one because some of them I might end up doing in-depth episodes on the individual topics because I found, let's say, worth contemplating further. So the first one is the impact of one well-run religious institution cannot be underestimated. Throughout the summit and even the weeks following, I ended up meeting a lot of people who credited St. Michael's Abbey in Los Angeles for really informing their faith lives or encouraging them to take their faith more seriously. This one particular institution that is well run has influenced hundreds or probably even thousands of highly influential people, many of them who work right in the heart of Hollywood, often in very important positions. And these people have the ability and are likely at this point to change the way that Hollywood runs and the type of things that Hollywood produces. If not entirely, at least in some part, right? Maybe something good will come out of it rather than just like an absolute pipe of horrible garbage, right? This was a very tangible example of something that I've believed for a while, that we as business owners can galvanize the creation of projects or initiatives, including funding them, that can transform culture. So someone originally had to fund St. Michael's Abbey. I don't know the history there, but at least dozens of people had to promote the heck out of this to get it growing and to get people involved. And then hundreds, if not thousands, have to make the commitment to participate and to be part of that community. So the point I'm trying to make here is that each one of us can at least do some of these things to build an institution like St. Michael's Abbey in our neck of the woods. That we can either participate in a thriving community that already exists, right? Or one community that's good but needs more participation and could thrive should more people participate. We can all do that at the bare minimum. I think we all have an absolute responsibility in justice to God to do that, and in justice to these communities who are doing great things. We can contribute to these communities or these existing programs financially if we have the means to do so. Maybe we don't have the vision to stand up something brand new, but these are existing things around us. We can support them financially. We can promote them by telling our friends about them. I think this is a severely underrated thing. I naturally do this because it's my personality type. I'm a campaigner. We should be, in effect, campaigning and promoting the things that are good in our lives, right? Like if you have a really great parish program or a series of talks, you should be telling people about it, right? Catholic or not, invite people. There's these existing resources being just effectively gone to waste if they're not used. So we can tell other people, and then we can, of course, take advantage of the existing resources and programming. And then for those of us who have a bit more, we can spearhead the creation of new institutions like these. And for those of us with a lot, we can actually back them financially in a substantial way. So just think about which of these things really will apply to you and what particular gifts that you have to contribute, participate, promote, or even fund some of these projects. Because when you take a look at St. Michael's Abbey, this is just one example. This institution, again, well run, well funded, can really, really transform culture. We're seeing a lot of the fruits of that right now, and I think we'll see even more in the coming decades. I don't know that St. Michael's Abbey will actually end up getting credit for this because, again, it's going to be in the background a lot. But if you kind of dig through and you see what are the people who've been influenced by St. Michael's Abbey doing, it's going to be very impactful, especially in the case of Hollywood because they're close to such a cultural center, right? There's obviously any city has their own cultural kind of influences or things that they bring to the table in the broader country or context, and we can build those things as Catholics that we want to change the culture, right? Quick interruption. Big shout out to Verso Jobs for sponsoring this show. Joe and the team at Verso Jobs have built an incredible company that helps Catholic founders hire people who are actually aligned with your mission. They have built this incredible gamified and data-driven platform that helps you hire people who actually share your mission and values. And the best part is, it's built by Catholics. So whether you're hiring for your startup, school, parish, or nonprofit, Verso makes it easy to find mission-aligned talent that's ready to build the kingdom. Just visit versojobs.com to get started. That's Verso, V-E-R-S-O, jobs.com. To the heights. The second one is our unity as the church is something that we need to lean into if we want to make a change in the world. So during the very first discussion on faith in Hollywood, David Henry pointed out that the church used to have strict observation of boycotting bad films. Not bad in terms of like just, not well done artistically, but bad in terms of bad culturally, bad things that the bishops did not want to promote in the church. So the bishops would inform the faithful when a film was unsuitable for consumption or when it would promote kind of negative things in the culture. And as a church, we submitted to that authority. We avoided those movies, and as a result, we helped them underperform in the box office. And that helped produce better films because if you were going to get boycotted by the bishops, because you had bad stuff in your film, by the Catholics broadly, you would be less likely to create something in the first place that's going to lose an entire audience, right? Nowadays, I don't know that completely stands, but if all Catholics were to just suddenly, flip a switch and start following what the bishops are asking, and if the bishops were, to speak out about these things, we could probably make a very big dent in what types of movies get produced. Again, simply by effectively like voting with our dollars. Of course, over time, this sense of marching together has really kind of fallen apart to an extent. But the point I'm trying to make here is that unity is one of the transcendentals, right? It's something that we should consider and think about a little bit more because this can bring us closer to God if we understand what this means. I'm not going to go into unity right now in the transcendental. It's something I still have to learn a lot about, but it's something to look into a little bit more. Again, if we want to bring God back into the culture, we are going to need to regain this sense of unity. It all starts with just each one of us individually willingly submitting to the authority of the church. And on an even deeper level, we have to submit to the universal call to holiness, which supersedes even our vocation in life or even our call to marriage or religious life. We need to put our desire for heaven above everything else. And when we do that, we can then go deeper in our faith. And if this becomes our core identity, we will be in pursuit of unity with God. And the closer we get to this, the more we become like instruments in God's grand symphony, playing in union and following His direction to create the most beautiful song you've ever heard. If we don't pursue that unity, we'll be like that one violinist who keeps playing sour notes because they refuse to wash the director's hand. And I don't think any of us listening to this podcast want to be like that person. So just again, consider this idea of unity and how if we are truly deep in our spiritual lives, we become like an instrument in God's symphony that can really make this beautiful thing that goes out into the world. And consider what the opposite is, right? Consider the contrast if we don't do that. And also consider how often we choose not to do this actively, but also how many times we choose not to do this just by not thinking about it and not being very attentive. The third biggest takeaway I have is if you stay close to the sacraments, it's almost like having autopilot help you navigate storms. So there were a lot of people who talked about facing challenges in business and how staying close to the sacraments, i.e., Mass as often as you can, ideally daily, confession every 2 to 3 weeks, and frequent visits to adoration. When you face those challenges, when they hit you, it's like the storms that are rocking the boat and the proximity. When those storms do hit you, and the storms are, rocking the boat, making things really rough, the proximity to the sacraments is what helps you realize how little the storm actually matters in the first place. Because at the end of the day, you know that God is taking care of you, that He's guiding you, and that nothing we encounter in business really matters as much as eternity. The only thing that can harm us is sin. So, along with this, it's worth noting that if you think God is your main priority and you're listening to this and think, yeah, I'm doing that, I would do an audit of your calendar. If God is truly your number one priority, you're going to see a pretty substantial amount of time spent in prayer, attending Mass, praying the Rosary, meeting with your spiritual director, etc. So, do this as an exercise because a lot of people like to believe that they're on the right track for these things, but when they really dig into it, there's still a lot to be desired. Again, nobody's perfect, but you can at least get a snapshot very quickly of whether or not you're at least heading in the right direction. If you don't have, I would probably guess that for even the average person, you probably should have around, 5 to 7 hours a week at least in prayer, at least an hour a day of some sort of prayer routine, whether that's Mass, Rosary, etc. If you don't have that, you probably know, hey, there's a lot to be desired here. Let me turn up the volume on these things so that I'm making sure that God is truly my number one priority. All right, my fourth takeaway is that good leadership is always virtuous leadership. Dave Durand, the founder of Best Version Media and someone who has now had 2 nine-figure exits, he gave an incredible keynote and he brought just generally a lot of energy and was very raw and real with us. He's got a new book out called Leading Giants. And during his talk, he gave some examples of how all good leadership is just virtuous. It's avoiding the extremes on either end of the spectrum. I won't go into all his points because I do plan to have him on the podcast soon. But in the meantime, I'd recommend getting his book, Leading Giants. We'll put the link in the description as well. So again, all true leadership is virtuous leadership, aka Catholic leadership. The fifth takeaway I have is as entrepreneurs, we have a special calling to exemplify the virtue of hope. I wrote about this on Monday, actually, so you might have read some of this in the newsletter in the Saintly CEO. And I'll probably do an entire podcast on this at some point. I need to continue formulating my thoughts, though. But Frank Hanna, the investor and philanthropist, gave a very good talk on hope and its connection to investing and philanthropy. Some of the key things that I would just point out to consider from his talk, again, I'm not going to put this in some kind of nice order here, it's more so just points to consider, is that wealth is primarily determined by our relationships to our family, and most importantly with God, of course. If we have all of the money in the world, but no relationship with God, we are pretty much sunk. We have no wealth, right? The second one would be our current wealth is determined by our amount of hope. So when we have hope for heaven, the way we live our lives is very different than if we have no hope whatsoever. In a similar example, the value of a stock, he gave the example of Nvidia. The value of Nvidia is determined by our hope for its future. If Nvidia's products become illegal tomorrow through some legislation, our hope would basically go to zero. It would go out the window. And with our hope going out the window, so would the market cap of that stock, right? No more hope for the future means crashing current value, right? Something just to really think about, like this connection between the future and the current, the future hope expectation and the current value that we have. Again, this is with, he gave the example of something financial, but it's also with our spiritual lives, right? With our expectations of heaven. Third thing to consider from Frank's talk would be, as business owners who are Catholic and have hope for heaven, we have a very important responsibility to invest in our businesses, our communities, our employees, etc. Because when we invest in these things, we are demonstrating the hope for a better future. The best future is one where more men are saved, where more men achieve salvation. How we run our businesses, the products we offer, the charities that we give to, even the stocks that we invest in, all of these things should be tied to bringing more men into eternity. If we're not thinking about that, we should start to consider it as we go through our lives. Like, how is this action I'm taking, this optimism of the future, how is this tied to the ultimate hope of eternity that we're trying to bring ourselves closer to and others around us? The final point from this on hope is that if we do not have hope, we will not do certain things. We won't get married, we won't have children, we won't invest in our communities, and ultimately we'll kind of lose the will to live. You have to have this hope for the future. And we're going through an unprecedented time of declining birth rates. I think that this idea of hope is more important than ever. As Catholics, whether or not you run a business, but again, most of you listening probably do, we have a responsibility to invest further into this idea of hope and to really lean into it, because we do trust in God. And if we don't trust in God, we should ask for more grace to do so and to have that hope, especially where the world is now, as Catholics. So in general, just to recap, we must have hope, especially where the world is now. We as Catholics have a responsibility to shine this light of hope to the world. Are you a Catholic business owner trying to bring in more leads? Launching a podcast might be the best move that you haven't made yet. St. Colby Studios helps Catholic entrepreneurs launch professional, mission-aligned podcasts that build trust and increase leads. Their team walks with you through every step of the way, from strategy and recording to branding and editing, so you can launch your podcast in under 90 days. And because you're a Catholic Founder listener, you'll get 20% off all services for the remainder of 2025. Just mention the show when you reach out. 158 million people listen to podcasts every month, and that's just in the U.S. Your ideal customer may already be listening to a competitor's podcast. Visit stcolbystudios.com to schedule your free consultation today. Thank you, St. Colby Studios, for sponsoring this episode of Catholic Founder. All right. My sixth and final takeaway from the Sent Summit is that the power of connecting in person with other like-minded and driven Catholics cannot be dismissed or underrated. It was really clear to anyone who just took a moment to observe the room that all of these people were so thrilled to be surrounded by people who share their motivations and share their faith. There was also just a lot of motivation derived from seeing people who have achieved so much and dedicated their lives to their faith. They're fully dedicated towards God, but yet they've achieved so much. So that's my biggest thing, is in other words, if you do not have a good community of Catholic builders around you, build one or join one. And obviously, if you want an online version of that, consider joining the Catholic Founders Guild. We are currently primarily online, but we do have strong numbers in San Francisco, Dallas, Houston, and then a couple other areas that are growing pretty rapidly. If you do want to join the Catholic Founders Guild, just go to catholicfounders.com/subscribe. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. So anybody can afford it. I've had a lot of members mention to me within a couple months of joining that they've already ended up doing business with other members in the group. So, there's a business case to be made there too. I don't want you to join for that reason. I want you to join if you believe in the idea that we have an opportunity and a responsibility as Catholic entrepreneurs to bring God back into the world. If that's something that resonates with you, I think you should be part of it. If you're just here to make connections and to make a buck from the other members, I wouldn't want you joining. So again, ask yourself and think about it and pray about it. If you want to join, we'd love to have you. Before I wrap it up here, I do want to shout out some upcoming events that we are hosting. The Catholic Founders Guild expert call of this month is going to be on go-to-market advice with Ellen Twomey. He specifically has this really interesting perspective on growth and go-to-market from a virtue perspective. That'll be happening October 28th at 1 p.m. Central. And going forward, the fourth Tuesday of every month is going to be our expert call. So in November, December, etc., we're going to have different experts, maybe not December, but every month we're going to be having this expert call, bringing somebody else in from the community or from outside of the community to give us a sort of like a 20-minute pitch or talk that'll help us learn, and then we have an opportunity to ask them questions. Most recently, we did one on the tax changes with Chris Royalty. So again, that's happening October 28th at 1 p.m. Central Time. If you do want to be part of this, you must be a member of the Catholic Founders Guild. Again, you can sign up in the description. We are also hosting a Catholic Founders Dinner in Chicago. So this is going to be open to anybody who's a Catholic business owner, whether you read Catholic Founders or not, whether you listen, whether you're a paid member or not, doesn't matter. This will be invite only though. We're only going to have space for about 25 people. If you are interested in attending, reach out to me. This is happening November 4th from 6 to 9 p.m. in a suburb just south of Chicago. There will also be an after party. So it's going to be an entire evening of programming where we'll sit down, we'll have dinner with a special guest, and I'll interview them during dinner. And then we can ask them questions. We can kind of go around the table, talk about some of our struggles. There'll be a little bit of a reflection at the end, and then we'll go and do some networking afterwards and have a good party. The final event that I'll mention is that there is a Catholic Entrepreneurs Gathering in San Francisco, which should be happening on the 20th of November. The time and date are still being locked down, but I wanted to put this on people's radar that some friends of mine are hosting an event there.